Recording. Okay, welcome to the show, Dr. Novotny. Thank you so much for being with me today. How are you? What is going well?
I'm doing well, Simon. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and inviting me on. It's an honor to be here and great, having a good day and ready to talk and share.
Wonderful. Talking, sharing is what this is all about. So that's great. You're in a good space. I love it.
Mhm.
Why don't you just introduce yourself to myself and the audience? Let us know who you are and what it is that you do, please.
Sure, absolutely. So I originally got my doctorate in physical therapy, and I did that for a few years and then switched out of that to helping people in kind of a unique way. So some people ask, well, what is it you do? And I usually say, well, for some people, I help them out of surgeries. They alleviate pain that would necessitate a joint replacement, back surgery, neck surgery, rotator cuff surgery, ACL surgery. For other people, it's alleviating their stress, their anxiety, their panic. For others, it's insomnia, helping them sleep better at night. And even others, it's chronic pain. But the common thread for all of that is this nervous system, the fight or flight nervous system that ramps us up and puts us on high alert. As we learn to calm that down and get into a parasympathetic relaxation, starts to free up the body. So we free up the body, the joints start to move normally again, your muscles start to work normally again, your body can feel calm. So you're less emotionally reactive. You are less, in that frantic state. And so that's kind of what I do.
Cool. Love that. Did you learn about so some of the methodology in which you use to help those people, whether they're recovering from an injury or they have stress in their lives? Did you learn about that during your doctorate, or is it something that you kind of had a keen interest in, a connection to maybe personally, and that's kind of like what led you down that route?
Yeah, it's a kind of the latter. So I didn't learn about this in the doctoral program at all, and it was quite interesting because when I was in that program, we learned ways to help people in various, joint pains, but it didn't feel like the answer to me. I'd see people with chronic pain and like, okay, I'm addressing what I was supposed to, looking at all the body parts, but they're still having issues. And so at the same time, I was training for the Boston Marathon, qualifying for it, and I was running on a treadmill, 8 miles in less than an hour, 3 times a week. And if you're a marathoner, and I had already run, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 marathons or whatever, it's very common to have some type of pain that's associated with the running. That kind of lingers usually for a few days, few weeks or whatever. And at the time, I started experimenting with my own body, changing the nervous system by changing how I positioned myself in the mechanics of my diaphragm. And when I did that, all of a sudden, like pain went away just like that, like literally just like that. And I got off the
Wow.
treadmill and it didn't feel like I just ran 8 miles in 50 minutes. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, really interesting. And so I started experimenting with it more and more. I stopped stretching, I stopped foam rolling, I stopped scraping, all the different tools that I was telling people you had to do. And that's how I started developing this technique. And at first it was to help people with pain. And then people would tell me my stress is less. Like I'm not having the panic attacks. I'm not having anxiety attacks. I can sleep again. And so that's when I realized, okay, I'm not just doing something on a superficial level. I'm helping people change something about their mental health as well, their emotional health, their ability to calm. And that's when I started diving into, okay, what am I really impacting? Is it, and it's not me. And when I say me, I shouldn't say me. What is the person really impacting? It's their nervous system. They're learning how to change their nervous system. And it took several years of putting pieces together and thinking, okay, John here, he walked in, bent over, he couldn't stand up. And then when he left, he's, kicking his leg up in the air, dancing around all fine. And then, his whole mentality was different too. And so it took some time to figure that out. And then, especially when I shifted to all virtual in 2020 and started working with people more for stress and anxiety and trauma, that's when I realized, okay, there's more to it than just meets the eye.
That's super interesting. And a question that's just come up for me in my mind right now is like, how do you, because you told me at the beginning you work with people who like have had a surgery or an injury, and then also people who maybe have like depression or anxiety and who want to like, get through that or heal it, how do you connect the two of those? Because if I was, because at the end of the day, like say if you go to a doctor with the the injury or the pain, you're going to get referred like somewhere completely different. And if you go to a doctor and you say you're depressed and you've got these other symptoms, fatigue and you're going to go and see someone completely different. So like, how is it that you are like bringing both of those into the same practice? How do you explain to people like the engagement of the nervous system, like that's kind of like in the middle of that?
Yeah. So in both of those cases, the body is holding on to something from the past or even the present. So whether it's stress that leads to muscles contracting that pulls the joints out of position and now leads to tissues butting up against each other and causing pain, or with like anxiety, a person's had some stress that's developed into some worry that's developed into chemical brain changes and body changes that has led to this spiral, so that they then have tension and pressure in their body that leads to a change in their body and even more problems. So that's another way. Both of them, they lead to different results based on a person, their body, and how they react to stress. But they both have this commonality that when you help someone get out of a fight or flight mode, it can release them physically, but it can release them mentally and emotionally. And we talk about this, it's called your autonomic nervous system and how it plays a role in your body. And there's a breakdown of that nervous system and how that affects people. And so often someone who is suffering from maybe anxiety or depression, they often have a psychologist or psychiatrist that they're talking to get mental strategies, and then working with me on the body releasing the stored trauma from their past that has led them down the road of anxiety, panic, and depression.
Is that a tough thing to explain to people? Because I feel like you're talking about like stored energy or stored something. And when you use the word holding on to something,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, if we can't use our senses to experience something, then it's very, very difficult for us to understand like what that actually means. So when you say holding on to something, like what does that mean? And how do you explain to somebody that like that experience that they have, be that like psychological or physical accident, how that's like still physically manifested within the body, and whether that's like in a specific tissue or something? It's just like I find it very difficult to explain like how energy and frequency works within like our human body to people who've got no experience with that, and also like really just understand their reality through like their senses. And if we can't see it or touch it or smell it or feel it, then it's not right really there. And I just wonder, how do you explain that to people? Because I feel like to get on that road to recovery, they have to be on the same understanding as you, right? Because if their knowledge is not in it, there's no way they're going to be able to like do the work outside of your office that's going to get to the results that they want to get.
Yeah, and so a lot of times I'll use kind of vivid examples. So for instance, I'll say, okay, if I lift a pail of water with my arm, I can see the bicep muscle in my upper arm contract and I can relax it. That's a voluntary control. If I can see it work, I can get it to stop. Now, if I'm just sitting here talking to you and all of a sudden I hear a loud bang go outside, and to me it sounds like a gunshot, and I jump and I tense all up. Now, if I was still holding that bucket of water and I put the bucket down, not all of that bicep muscle would go away. Some of it would still be contracted. And the rest of my body would feel contracted too. And most people can visualize that. When I heard that bang, it developed a fear in me. And that caused my whole body to contract. And I feel like I tightened up. I may be in a ready position to run or flee or jump out a window or, hide for dear life. If I look outside and I see, oh, dang it, it was just a car backfiring. It was nothing for me to fear. Now, when I did that, I just looked out and I cleared myself mentally, emotionally, and intellectually. But if I don't pause a second and clear myself physically, my nervous system is going to keep all of those muscles in my body contracting. And when it keeps them all contracting, my physical state is storing up that response from that sound that I equated with fear. And so this is what happens to us on a daily basis. We have little tiny stressors that may not be so big as that emotional stressor, but we have little tiny stressors that happen all day long where our body reacts and contracts and gets a little bit tighter. You hear some bad news from your boss, or you have an employee that's not behaving the way you like, and you just kind of tense up a little bit, and you're just like on edge. You're sitting on the edge of your chair. Now, that might resolve, but if you didn't stop and clear your body and say, okay, let go of that tension and go through a process of releasing it. If you don't do that, your nervous system is going to think that it needs to continue doing that. And that's where people get in trouble, is they don't release that tension and that extra tone in their body on a daily basis. And I usually say I recommend releasing it a couple times a day, because you don't want it to build up. And that's why people get stiff, tight, they can't bend over, their hamstrings are tight, they feel like they can't breathe, they can't sleep at night because their body can't calm down, they're emotionally reactive. The list goes on and on. So if we can get the body to clear on a daily basis, you can see your emotional reactivity is not so great. Your ability to focus improves. You are mobile, more flexible, stronger. You can just keep naming all the benefits.
Yeah, we see so many examples of that, like nervous system shifting, clearing, recalibration, whatever you want to call it, within the animal kingdom, right? And whether it's because we've got like a little bit more complex brains and we have this like wild ability to be able to experience the same kind of like minor stresses quite unconsciously every single day, and we're not quite aware of them actually coming in and causing those, like, you know, the blocking of energy or the tightness within your body, or just the continuous engagement of your sympathetic nervous system, be it like tiny fragmented times, like 1,000 times a day. We're not like super aware of that. But like, what's the difference between like clearing your body in the moment of something happening? Say like you're super experienced at doing this and something happens and you get that fright, you get that shock, and then you recognize that, it's not a great threat to you right now, and then you can clear that experience from you. What's the difference between that process and then what most people do, which is like it just gets stored up and stays in the body, and we don't ever like take steps to recalibrate?
Yeah. So when you release, after a big event or on a daily basis, it's the easiest way to say it is your body feels free. You don't feel restricted. You feel like a little kid again, where you can just sit on the floor, you can crawl on the floor, you can sit however you want, you can roll around, you can climb stairs, you can get in and out of bed. You're not careful because you're not afraid you're going to injure yourself, because things just flow. And you don't feel pressure in your body. Breathing is easy. Movement is easy. Things just work and flow. And so I call it body freedom. Your body's freed up. But when you don't take those steps and you don't learn how to release your body or the muscles and the systems every day, what happens is the muscles start to pull abnormally. And each day there could be a little bit of shift and a little bit of shift, a little bit of shift. And they're pulling on bones and joints two bones come together to create a joint, sometimes more than two bones. But the two bones, just to make it simple, come together, create a joint, and there's space usually between those bones to allow you to move and slide and stuff like that. What happens when muscles start to pull abnormally, they start to pull the bones just slightly out of position, and you can decrease space, and then you get rubbing and wear and a tear. And that's when people develop chronic pain. And you often see it where someone hasn't had an injury at all, and they go to bed after a really stressful event. They wake up the next morning, they have some type of pain. And they're like, where did that come from? Like, I literally wasn't doing anything. And then they'll say, oh, it must have been because 20 years ago I got into that skiing accident. And they just continue, and the pain gets worse, they go and they'll get a x-ray and they're like, oh yeah, it's arthritis, you have arthritis now. And so they'll blame it on that, or bursitis, or you have tendonitis, and they'll blame it on those different things. And I'm like, okay, what if we get you to release some of that tension in your body that was derived from various stressors, whether it's a physical stressor, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever your stressor is, or a combination of. What if we start to get your body to release? The muscles are not told to contract like that anymore because the nervous system calms down. The muscles start to release the joints. Now the bones go back into their normal position, and you slide and glide and you move the way that you were designed. And the thing is, then the pain stops because the impingement and the wear and tear stops. Now, have you stopped the arthritis? Well, arthritis is really a wear and tear of the cartilage on your bone, but people equate arthritis with pain. It's not really the same thing. But if you get rid of the pain, that doesn't mean your arthritis went away. It just, your cartilage could still be gone, but you're not having the pain because the tissues are not butting up against each other. And so I prefer people avoid all of that sequela. So I encourage people to learn to release their body on a daily basis. It's preferably as young as possible to learn it, because it's not that old age equals pain, which most people think it does. It's older age equals a lot of stresses that have built up and the potential that they weren't released. Some people are very good at releasing their stressors, and that's why they don't have pain. Others, not so much. And that's why they need guidance and help to be able to teach themselves how to do that.
Would you say that a lot of like disease, like that we, pathologize, is a big buildup of this, lack of clearing?
I would say so, on many different levels. One is the nervous system level. So yes, from there. From a mental and emotional level as well, because your hormones and chemicals change based on how well you handle stress, manage stress, how well you perceive yourself, negativity versus positivity of thoughts, that determines stuff, as well as even what you put in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So much of disease is related to the foods we eat and the drinks we intake. So that, as well as how well you sleep. So all of it's kind of combined, but the nervous system definitely plays a major role.
If the further back the trauma is that harder to clear, or is it like the more recent it is, like how do you like go about that? Because obviously a lot of people's pain, trauma, emotional experience, mostly negative. Is it harder like as you go back because of the, 'cause there's maybe decades in between like you doing the work with them and then the actual thing kind of happening to them? I mean, obviously, yeah, it's tricky. Like, is it harder to treat when it's like happened so further back in the past?
I would say there's a definite element when it happens when you're a young child. There's a definite element of a permanence, because our first 7 years we're going through life and we're developing a lot of subconscious programming. So if you're traumatized as a little child, you're definitely going to develop some protective mechanisms and subconscious programming that will impact your decision making as an adult. At the same time, a lot of it depends on a person's experience and their interpretation of what happened to them. And there can be people who get through that trauma based on the way they interpret the event and how their body responds. And that might be a little bit faster of a progression as they move through the processing of that trauma. And then some people go into like a fight or freeze state where it stays with them, or they dissociate from their body and can't connect to their body. And so that's going to be a longer process to be able to move through it and not necessarily forget the trauma, but be able to coexist with the past of what happens and learning to change, or at least be able to mentally go through what happened to them, but not have that same live in-body experience at the moment they're thinking about it.
Yeah, it sounds like we could serve our children and, you know, when they turn into adults so much better with just like simple education around like what the nervous system is, what it does, how it impacts you on a day-to-day basis autonomically. It would just be quite, I've had a few clients in my nutrition practice, like adults, and I ask them like, you know, what do you know about like your nervous system and like your fight or flight response? And then like nobody knows like really the difference between what's going on. And then when you explain it even just a little bit, I have this like very simple YouTube kind of like cartoony video that I share to people, and it blows their mind in a few minutes because they can recognize that, oh, I'm just constantly in this stress state. There's no wonder like my digestion's all over the place, and I eat all the great foods in the world, and I exercise like insane amounts, and I still can't lose weight and do all these things. And then people will start recognizing like what the nervous system is, what it does, how it like continuously fluctuates. And it kind of goes back to the point I was saying, like if we can't like see it or like touch it, then it, you know, it's very, very difficult for people to kind of wrap their heads around. But obviously the nervous system very much is like as we're kids is viciously involved, and it ends up, you know, teaching us how to think, how to respond, how to feel, and how to like be. So it's we're clearly like doing a disservice in regards to the miseducation or just like uneducation of the nervous system. But I'd love to talk to you about breathing, because you said something really cool about you know, when you were on the treadmill and, you know, you were working with your diaphragm. I love it. Can you just tell us like what the diaphragm is, and what is it that we misunderstand about breathing? Because we obviously all breathe, but we don't maybe all do it well or enough, or I don't know. You explain, please.
Yeah. So the diaphragm is a muscle inside our torso, our trunk, and it has a dome shape to it and then walls. So if you imagine a barn silo, maybe a short squatty one, not really a really tall one, but a short squatty one. There's some walls and then there's a dome that sits on top of it. Now, ideally, that muscle is designed for us to use to take in air into our lungs so we can get oxygen into our bloodstream and therefore and go forward with that. Now, the problem is we're often used to using our rib cage to breathe instead of the diaphragm. So how many times have you gone to a doctor and the doctor says, okay, take a deep breath in, and they'll go, and they lift up their shoulders, their ribs and chest and arch their back. And we see that all the time. We're taught, take a deep breath in, just puff up your chest, take that deep breath in. And so I say, well, that's teaching you to use your ribs. If you're sitting here right now and you initiate an inhalation and your lower ribs down by the kind of the front lower ribs on the side, if you feel them lift up, you're using your rib cage to breathe. Those ribs, ideally, we want them to be still, because those ribs being down and being held down by the side abdominal muscles, that's what supports the diaphragm. So the diaphragm dome can drop down to allow you to inhale. So basically, when we breathe in air, the way that we get air into the lungs is through creating a space inside us that has negative pressure so air flows in. Okay. That is the purpose of the diaphragm. The diaphragm dome contracts down, which creates almost like this empty space or negative pressure, so air flows in like a vacuum. Same thing what a vacuum does. Things get sucked into the vacuum. Well, our diaphragm is kind of like our vacuum. It's trying to pull air into our lungs. The problem is if the diaphragm is not supported and the dome can't drop down, then you have to do something else to create a negative pressure situation or like a vacuum situation. And since most people aren't supporting their diaphragm, they're lifting up their ribs to create that same effect. So if you breathe and you feel yourself lifting up your rib cage going up or out, or you're arching your back, your shoulders lifting up, your head's going back, you know you're not really using your diaphragm to its full potential. You're using a lot of accessory aspects of your body to try to get air in. And some people are like, well, who cares? Like, I'm getting air in, all that. Isn't that what's important? Well, not really. The diaphragm also, there's a nerve that goes through it called the vagus nerve that goes from your brainstem. It goes down, and it's what tells a lot of your organs to work. when the diaphragm's going up and down, that dome is going up and down, it stimulates that nerve, and that nerve calms you down.
Interesting.
Calms you down so those organs can work better. So you want to use your diaphragm. You really do. Real quick too,
Yeah,
just
sure.
the other reason you don't want to use your neck, back, shoulders, and ribs to breathe is because the more you do that, the more those muscles get used and develop knots and tightness. And that's another driving force of why people get a lot of neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, all of those pains. It's because they're using these muscles to breathe and they're not supposed to be breathing with those muscles.
Would I be right in saying that most people breathe with like their rib cage and their upper body?
A lot of people breathe by, they call it belly breathing or their rib cage. So belly breathing is not diaphragmatic breathing. Belly breathing is just shoving your belly out and causing your back to contract or distending your abdomen. So a lot of people will do that, or they lift up the rib cage and just, try to get air into their chest.
Why do most people that's obviously breathing incorrectly, I suppose, but like, why are most people doing that? Like I presume we were designed pretty well through evolution, and at some point we stopped doing it properly. Like what cultural evolution has caused this?
Usually it's when people are kids, they listen to their parents who say, sit up straight, chest out, shoulders back, suck up your gut. As soon as you listen to someone and do that, you change your breathing mechanics. And now you're going to start to go towards a path of tightness, breathing problems, or pain, or something like that. When you look at little toddlers and kids, before they're cognizant and before they can listen to us, their ribs are down, their bellies are out. Which is what we want. So when I tell someone to exhale, I say, let your belly come out, let your ribs drop down. You want to get back to being free in your body, roly-poly like a little kid. Do the exact opposite of what you've been told to do by well-intentioned parents, teachers, military, performing arts, athletic coaches. I mean, the list goes on. And if you can let go of what you were taught and you get back to way that you were as a little kid before you started listening, guess what? Your body starts to return that way too. And obviously there's a process to it because most people have so many patterns that they've learned. I mean, I have a gentleman right now. He's like, I purposely was trying to suck up my chest or suck up my gut, hold my chest down. I was perfectly trying to breathe up as far as I can into my brain. And I'm like, you're supposed to breathe down, not up. You want to breathe in and down. You want to breathe in horizontally and go down. And he was doing the exact opposite. And you can see it in his body and all the pains and stuff. And it saddens me, but I'm glad he reached out to me and we've been working through it and he can feel a difference. It's really neat to see the difference.
Well, you said the diaphragm's a muscle, right? So obviously if we're not breathing correctly, we're not going to be engaging that muscle enough. It's not going to be like toned. It's not going to be like trained enough, like as you would, like, if you're going to work out other muscles in the gym or whatever. Does we love to sit a lot in our culture. We lie in bed all night and then we go and sit down and have our coffee and then we sit in our desks and we come home and we sit and watch the TV. Does that have an effect? Because I know we're obviously not supposed to be like sitting, like we would be like squatting if we were going to be engaging closer to the floor, but like, does that play a role in like that lack of muscle tone?
Yeah. So a diaphragm is different from like skeletal muscles, like your legs and arms. It's different because it works automatically. But the problem comes from how you position your rib cage and how you use the side abdominals to support the diaphragm. So that's where you develop the tone. So sitting itself isn't necessarily like destroying the diaphragm. It's how you're sitting. How are you positioning your rib cage and what muscles are you using to hold the rib cage in position? That will determine whether or not you're shifting to a use of your diaphragm or not. A lot of people, the way they sit can encourage the diaphragm not to be used. So that would be a problem. But also you can stand a certain way that does the same thing too. But obviously in terms of health and fitness, and I'm one where I want people healthy as possible. I wouldn't recommend sitting for, more than 15 minutes at a time without getting up and moving around, and then alternate between sitting and standing, those types of things.
What type of muscle tissue is the diaphragm made of? We obviously have like cardiac muscle, we have smooth muscle, we have skeletal muscle. Like what muscle is it made of?
It's still part of, we would say, skeletal muscle. It's not like a smooth muscle like an organ,
Okay.
because it has innervation and it can contract and relax. It's not like that. There is the nerve that stimulates it, but it's not under like a voluntary control, like we would say like a biceps would be.
And are there any like if I want to like go and find out like the quality of my diaphragm? Like, is there tests out there? Can you do can you do like an MRI? Would that give you any idea of just like how it looks?
Well, you could do probably an MRI test to see what it looks like, or maybe something like a CAT scan
Okay.
to see what it looks like. It's not really like, most people are not going to get a doctor that would
No.
say, I'm going to prescribe this and you get this covered on insurance or whatever, to go radiate yourself to look at your diaphragm.
No, sure.
Unless, of course, your diaphragm wasn't working and you're dying, or something like that. So it's not really would say a common test to go and, or diagnostic imaging to go look at it, unless you're having a severe problem.
Are there any like disease states that can be created from, having just like a really weak or really like poor or non-engaged diaphragm?
I mean, there's all different type. Anytime you're limiting your oxygen, you're going to have various various problems in your body. So, I mean, a whole slew of everything can happen if you're not circulating oxygen in your body. You can hurt your organs. You can develop pain, cyanosis. There's like all these different types of things. I mean, eventually it could be detrimental. I mean, that's why sleep apnea is such a big problem right now. um, Different changes in weight and how we hold ourselves can lead to sleep apnea, which then people feel foggy and have trouble sleeping, and just the brain processes are down as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, if you were to be like a very, very large individual and you had that increased pressure on those internal organs, obviously your diaphragm's going to be involved in that so a little bit as well. Would you mind taking us through like 5, 10 breaths of diaphragmatic breathing? Because I've totally heard of the phrase. I think I breathe pretty well. I'm not sure, but like, can you take us through a few breaths? Is that possible?
I can give you a couple and little hints. It's a process, though, and this is something
Okay.
that I do with my clients. So, um, when we go through this, you may not feel an effect because I'm not teaching you everything you need to know to actually create an effect, but I can just give you the 4 basic steps that will
Please.
kind of help you out, just to kind of get you on the right path. But just keep in mind, there's probably 100 different steps that need to be implemented. So, and
Okay.
it's not really the format for doing that because it usually takes several hours. So,
Okay. No.
um, but basically, what I tell people is, before you practice any type of breathing, you need to be in the correct position. So that position, whether you're sitting or standing or lying down, that needs to be worked on first. And that involves a variety of things to work on to do that. So, but I'm just putting that out there. You need to be in the correct position. Your rib cage needs to be in the correct position, because if you practice breathing and you're not in the correct position, you're just instilling further habits that are detrimental to you. So just want to put that out there. That's why I'm cautious about just telling people, go start breathing like this, because if you're breathing in the wrong position, you start breathing like this, you're basically telling your nervous system, hey, keep doing this and keep feeling bad. So, but the basic steps beyond that are breathing in the nose, pausing for a second, and then blowing out through the mouth, and then pausing and holding your breath for 2 to 3 seconds. And that sounds really simplistic in that, but there's a lot more to it about what to do with your rib cage and your belly button and your shoulders and all of that. But when you're going through the process, you may not be able to hold your breath initially for 2 to 3 seconds. And that's an indication you're in fight or flight mode. And as you practice and you start to change your position that allows you to support your diaphragm, and that becomes stronger, you may be able to hold your breath for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And so it's this process of going through that. and learning once you relax your body, how do you stabilize in that new position? That's the key. Is we want to get you to be able to stabilize and hold yourself in this new position so the body can let go and it can release. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. No, I think that's very, very interesting because obviously, if you're going to do good quality breath work, with a practitioner like yourself, your physical body is going to become different. It's going to stand different. It's going to sit different. And it's very important to obviously be aware of those changes because they could be quite significant for somebody who's got like a lot of pain or a lot of tension or like, whatever going on for them. So it's obviously a very responsible way of doing it. On,
Yeah.
um, on breathing out, is there a difference between breathing out of your nose or breathing out of your mouth?
There is, and I tell people to start practicing breathing out through their mouth because that starts to encourage the side abdominal muscles to help pull your ribs back down. If you can learn how to have your ribs down and neutral and you don't have a drop off of your lower ribs because they're not flared up, once you have that and you can do that, then you can start to look at, oh, okay, maybe I can blow out through my nose now. And then, but every day I still recommend practicing blowing out through your mouth just to make sure you have the muscles are working.
Cool. Have you seen those people who like that they want to learn how to like nose breathe exclusively and then they like tape their mouths up like when they sleep and stuff? Have you ever seen that? Is that
You
just
know,
like
yeah.
absurd?
Not necessarily. So a lot of times they tape their mouth up actually because it helps them not have to urinate as much at night.
Oh,
And have to get up. So there's other reasons why they do that. So they're really trying to focus breathing in and out of the nose at night because there's studies that show that when you're breathing in and out of your mouth, it turns on a process that eventually gets you to urinate and have to get up in the middle of the night several times. And so it's if you can just train yourself to close your mouth, then you don't have to feel the restriction of tape over your mouth.
that's very interesting. I had no idea about that. That's obviously you want to try and disrupt. You want to reduce the disruption of your sleep as much as you possibly can. But that's very, very interesting. Cool. I want to talk a little bit more about pain and
Sure.
what pain is in regards to you as the particular type of practitioner that you are. If someone comes to you with pain, like how would you recommend that they like approach it? Not in regards to like going to see like a doctor or a physio, but like how would they like? I wake up one morning and I've got shoulder pain. How
Mhm.
would I like begin to like internalize that? Because I believe pain to be like this message coming from the nervous system, from the body, like trying to tell us something. But we love to like use creams or take drugs to just like avoid that message. So
Mhm.
can you tell us a little about like what pain is and like what we can do as maybe like a more of a thought process when it comes up for us?
Yeah, so I tell people if like let's say you wake up and like you give example of shoulder pain, not like we're talking about a liver pain and organ stuff like that, but like an orthopedic problem. I tell them it's a signal from your body to your brain and nervous system that something's out of position. Okay. So something happened, you had a stressful event, muscles tightened that had already been trained to tighten. You go to bed, they tighten up enough, the bones shift, you wake up, now you have pinching of tissues. So a lot of people, like you said, will try to do something to mask the pain just to get rid of it, but don't really change their position and do the work to solve the issue. And that's okay. And sometimes those pain pills or the injection or something, it reduces enough inflammation that creates a little bit of space so that the bones go back. They can still move again. It doesn't mean they go back into position, but they can move enough and there's enough cleared space that they don't have the pinching. And maybe in time, in a few days, that they start to relax because they're not on guard because the pain. And so maybe they stop having pain and their bones kind of relax back into a neutral position. So that would be the ideal situation. But a lot of times it's not that easy. So that's why we need to work on the body position and calming down the nervous system so the muscles stop behaving abnormally on the bones.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that whenever we do have some sort of like pain that kind of like comes up for us, that we immediately go to that area and as individuals and also like you go and see a doctor, you got shoulder pain, you go and see a shoulder specialist, you got ankle pain, you're going to go and see, you're going to go and see someone specific for that. But just from my experience with like when I had my first like kid, after a year after that, like carrying that baby and doing all these like new things with my body was like brand new to my body, and I was definitely like holding the baby on one side rather than the other or mixing it up, and I would like wake up with the most ridiculous like lower back pain on my right hand side, and immediately like, oh my god, my lower back, I've got problems there, I need to go and see someone about my right there where the pain is. But after like seeing some awesome practitioners and working through a lot of stuff, it's not actually my back that's my problem. Like I have a tight left glute and I have a tight hamstring on my other side, and that just twists my pelvis and causes the pain. And when I take care of both of those muscles with very simple stretching exercises, the pain just doesn't exist anymore. So it's just interesting that we experience pain and we just like zone in onto that particular area rather than like stepping back and being like, okay, like let's look at kind of the rest of my body and can we check in with that? But we just go straight to that zone, and then we kind of like go quickly, how can I get rid of this pain as quick as we can? And it doesn't end up like serving us in the long term.
Yeah. And I think part of that is if you think about it, when you're a kid, you fall down, you scrape up your knee, the pain is right there where that owie is. And a lot of people haven't done a lot of studies on the nervous system and understand that how the nervous system works and impacts muscles and how things can be referred and that. And so we just think, okay, pain there, that's the problem. And that's understandable because we just see a cause effect relationship and just connect the dots and don't realize that the body's a lot more complicated than that. But it's not until you get exposed to these different types of ideas, then you can say, wait a second, okay, maybe I do need to look at other things. And maybe my hip pain is really related to how I hold my neck. And my toe pain could be because of this shoulder. I just had just yesterday a lady who came to work with me. Everything is through Zoom. And she felt like a rib had popped out in her breastbone, and she had severe low back pain. And we did some work virtually, had her do it, and all of a sudden her back pain went away. So it's just, it can be all over like that.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I'm just being conscious of the time now. I've got so many questions I want to ask you. I'm gonna have to get you back on the show because it's such an interesting topic. But is so many people end up just like living with their pain and dealing with it, and it's quite remarkable like what the human body can literally suffer through for a long period of time. And people just end up just living with their pain, and in many cases it ends up defining them as a personality. I'm that person with pain, this is who I am, which is obviously a very limiting place to be. But when it comes to like aging and getting old, like is like weakness and pain and getting hurt, are these just like normal parts of aging, or like or should we hold ourselves to like something better or something higher? Like do we see these amazing people on like social media who are like 60, 70 years old, who just look in great shape, and they look happy, they look healthy. And then I look at the 70-year-olds in my life and they don't really look like that. I'm obviously aware of the nonsense of social media, but still there are amazing like old people out there who have just like maybe in their 30s, 40s and 50s decided that they want to live their marginal decade really, really well. So like is that pain, is that like a normal process of our society, like to just like get on and live with that, and we should all just be on like drugs and just get through the last 30 years of our lives?
No, absolutely not. It's sad that we equate that too. Like it's sad that we just think pain, oh, that's true, I'm just getting older. And I hear that all the time, and I tell people, no, just because you're aging does not equate pain. It doesn't mean your pain is from that. I know plenty of people who don't have aches and pains who are running 40 miles, on the weekends and living life fully. It's just a matter of, what do you want to do to address it? And do you want to guide yourself into freeing up your body? That's the true question, is how much work do you want to do? And I say, if you're retired, why not go on that journey? Why not go on the journey to free your body up? Because you have the time. And then when you feel better, your energy soars, you get involved in more activities, you go travel, whatever it is that interests you, you participate in it more, and people around you can feel the love.
Yeah, I find it interesting when I speak with the the kids of people who are in their like 60s and 70s, and they're telling their parents that they need to like slow down and stop doing these exercises because they don't want them to like fall, break a hip, and you know, become like become like super injured. And then a lot of these older people, like they do that, they like stop like doing all the things that they would to move their bodies, and they like, you know, they don't want to get like a hip fracture, they don't want to suffer any of these things, and that's literally the last thing that they should be doing if they want to avoid those things going forward, especially when it comes to like, you know, like literally lifting weights even in your 50s, 60s and 70s is such an incredible way to keep your bone strength up. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing that we have in our society, that we get old, we should just like slow down and get gray and, you know, deal with it.
That's unfortunate. We have to get people to change their mind on that one.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people out there who are helping facilitate that for sure. And you know, it's there's so much we can do. Like now, like my motivation for like eating well and like moving my body and, you know, having a good relationship with my stress is the fact that I want to be a very physically active 80-90-year-old. I'm like backcasting it rather than just thinking like in a short-term framework of like, what do I want to look like or do next year? I'm like, no. I'm thinking 40-50 years out, and there's so much I can do like now to do it. And it's such a strong motivator to get through, because like people find it very difficult to find that motivation to keep those things up for long periods of time. We take like the new year in January, for example, that lasts 2-3 weeks for people. If your motivation is like 50 years and you're thinking about your grandkids and your great grandkids, that's the true like heart, emotional, deep rooted motivation that's going to like really propel you to really experience the capability and potential of what your body can do. Yeah. Sorry, I think my coffee just kicked in there. I got all G'd up. Yeah, that's cool. I'm sure you agree with all of that. So that's wonderful. Your silence speaks volumes. Can you tell us, please, how can people connect with you? We didn't get to talk about your institute and some of your other methods, and you've got some awesome live online courses. Maybe we can get you back on the show to talk about that. But can you just tell us about how people can connect with you, please?
Absolutely. They can go to my website. It's PABRinstitute.com. So PABR stands for Pain Awareness Breathing Relief. And so they can go on there. You can set up a free 15-minute consultation. That's pretty much the way I work with people. Is an interview process just to make sure it's the correct fit and you know what you're getting yourself into. Just since this is a little bit of a different process, I want to make sure it's successful and you're ready to go. So you can work with me one-on-one, and also we have the live group courses as well. We have a couple different levels for that too, based on a person, and everyone has to go through the fundamentals before they can get to the advanced.
Very cool. Just another question. It's just a personal question. Do you do like couples? Like, I think that if my wife and I were going to learn how to breathe better and help us influence that on our kids, I think that'd be super valuable for me.
I do. Yep. I do couples. So especially because it's nice, because then you can help each other and cue each other. So I have several couples right now, and it works really well.
All right. Wonderful. Well, we might be having a consultation pretty soon. So that's wonderful.
Sounds great.
Wonderful. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I thought this was awesome. I learned so much, and I know this is going to be super valuable for a lot of people, because we all engage in breathing one way or the other, but to connect that with our pain and even like past trauma, I thought you explained that so well. And there are methods and institutes out there that can really support us through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on, Simon. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. Cool. Well, I'll make sure that everything that you need to have in order to get connected with Amy is in the show notes. That is it for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe if you wish to. You can leave us a review on iTunes if you feel compelled to. But that is it for this week of True Hope Podcast, the official podcast for True Hope Canada. We'll see you next week.